Well, China's state media has released a love ballad about its lovesick sailors patrolling the contested South China Sea. Let's have a listen.
Patrolling the South China Sea, guarding endless loneliness, endless vastness, and guarding this sea, this peace and harmony.
Well, make of it what you will. The title of this ballad is I Miss You on the South China Sea. Now, our foreign affairs reporter Stephen Dziedzic has also had a listen. He says it's a way for China to create a softer image of the country's coast guard and humanize those on board.
Well, I hope it's not intending to win any prizes for best music video, but it is, I think, revealing in its own way. I think there are two things most likely that China is after here, because there are two things that the supposed sailor is trying to project in this video. One is a sense of himself as a human being. So there's a real attempt here by Chinese state media and the people who produced this to try and humanize the people who are on board this vast armada of Coast Guard vessels, which, of course, is normally portrayed in far more hostile circumstances, at least on international news, whenever there's a confrontation between, for example, the Chinese Coast Guard and the Philippines Coast Guard. Normally, the pictures you see on your screen are the Coast Guard battering into a Philippines Coast Guard vessel, allegations of violence, all of that sort of thing. So what China's trying to do here is to present a softer image, to humanize the people on board that Coast Guard armada, and to try and win a few soft power points in the process. I think there's something else going on, though. If you look at the imagery within the actual video, it shows the South China Sea that is unquestionably China's, but also abandoned or empty. You know, the lyrics constantly stress, the beauty, the unspoilt nature that you see in the South China Sea, the absence of any human beings other than, of course, the lingering presence of rightful Chinese authority via the Coast Guard, gulls, coral reefs. So it's trying to frame the South China Sea not as a battlefield or as a contested space that's been militarized by China, but instead as a beautiful, bountiful, largely natural, untroubled stretch of sea that is unquestionably Chinese, guarded by China and guarded by humans who it thinks we should rather like and admire. So that's the subtle or not so subtle messaging, I think, behind this video, which was released very deliberately by the Chinese government on the 10th anniversary of the arbitral award in 2016, which of course found that China's 9-dash line was not valid.
Well, let's see how many soft power points it wins or loses, Stephen. Now, let's stay with China because it is no longer the dominant lender and infrastructure investor in the Pacific. It's been taken over by Australia, as revealed in the Lowy Institute's Pacific Aid Map. What can we read into the figures from this report?
Yeah, it's a fascinating development, and it's been happening for a while. This is not new. Really, since 2020, we've seen Australia emerge as a major lender in the region. And now what's clear, and perhaps particularly clear with some of the accumulated data you see this year, is that Australia has now really supplanted China as the main bilateral lender in the region. That's, of course, if you exclude multilateral institutions like the Asian Development Bank and the World Bank, which are still, by their own right, big players. So what's happened is Australia is no longer just the biggest aid donor in the Pacific. It's held that title for a long time, but it's also the biggest lender as well, with a large number of loans initially handed over to PNG to bolster its government balance sheets. More recently, though, we're seeing a large amount of money funneled out through things like the AIFFP into infrastructure in the region as well. So this is a relatively new thing for Australia to do, and it means that Australia is now going to have to balance some of the considerations that China had to balance back in the 2010s when it was the main lender in the region. Exactly how much debt can Pacific balance sheet safely take? How do you ensure these projects are delivered on time, on budget, and deliver an economic return that actually pays off that investment over the long term? Now, The government in Australia insists it's very keenly cognizant of all these questions and that it's going to continue to monitor this closely and that it will not burden Pacific nations with debts that they cannot handle. But as both the largest aid donor and now the biggest bilateral lender in the region, Australia's responsibilities run even deeper. It is worth noting, Girish, though, that this doesn't mean China's, irrelevant or reduced to the status of a bystander here. It's still got a major role in the Pacific. It's ramped up its grant funding in sort of more tightly targeted, localised projects in countries that are a key priority. And it is still a big player in infrastructure, though largely through those multilateral institutions I mentioned, which are still handing out hundreds of millions, billions of dollars in loans in the Pacific. China is still winning a large number, not all, but a large number of multilateral contracts through its state-owned enterprises. So that gives it a very visible presence on the ground in the Pacific, even if it doesn't hold sway in the infrastructure and lending space in the same way that it did, say, back in the 2010s.
And speaking of influence in the Pacific, Taiwan is temporarily suspending some imports of LNG gas from Papua New Guinea. That's after PNG announced that the Taiwan representative office in Port Moresby would close, much to China's delight. What do you make of this move by Taipei?
Yeah, it's a fascinating development. The first thing is that the Taiwanese haven't taken the most drastic action available, which would be to effectively tear up its main contract, which it's got with PNG through ExxonMobil to buy long-term supplies of LNG all the way out to 2030. That would have been a truly drastic step. It hasn't done that. Instead, as you say, it's suspended its so-called spot purchases on the market. So that's basically, when it turns around to look for short-term contracts or short-term purchase it can make to fill gaps and to provide the gas that it needs in the short term, it's basically saying it's not going to turn to PNG, through ExxonMobil again to fulfill those orders. Now, the exact impact this is going to have is pretty questionable, to be honest, because at the moment it's very much a seller's market in terms of the LNG market, largely because of the chaos that we're seeing in the Strait of Hormuz at the moment in the Middle East. You'd suspect that it's not going to be difficult for PNG to find a new buyer or ExxonMobil to find a new buyer. But it is still interesting that Taiwan has taken this step. It's very clear signalling here that it's not going to accept this ruling from PNG without a fight, and that it's willing to try and leverage its not insubstantial economic ties with Taiwan to try and force it to change its mind. Whether it's actually going to do that or not is another question, though, because PNG, as I mentioned, one, it has other options at the moment in terms of buyers, and two, it seems very determined to press ahead with this ruling from Justin Tkachenko, a ruling, incidentally, that Taiwan says came completely out of the blue and which absolutely blindsided them. But I think the fact that Taiwan has made this announcement, even if its financial impacts on PNG are going to be relatively limited, is a sign of just how worried it is about this announcement by PNG. And of course, the reason it's worried is not just because it will deprive it of an informal or de facto pseudo-embassy in Port Moresby in PNG. It's because it's worried that other countries, perhaps other developing countries, will now face pressure from China to follow PNG's lead. Wang Yi, China's foreign minister, has already said that its decision serves as a model for other countries. So you would have to say that's a real concern for Taiwan, and that might be one of the reasons why it's responded so furiously to this publicly and why it's taken this pretty unprecedented and extraordinary step.
Okay, Stephen Dziedzic in Canberra. As always, good to get your analysis. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Girish.